how to improve your business English and confidence when talking to international clients and colleagues. So this is very important. If you deal with these types of people, you want to be at ease, especially when you're talking about business. You don't want to be nervous. You don't want to be second guessing yourself. You want to speak competently, but you also want to be confident. So today we're going to talk about one awesome way to kind of improve that. Greetings, colleagues. I'm Timothy Barrett, and welcome to the For Business English Rundown, the show for professionals from all over the world who want to improve their communication skills in English. If you want to improve your business English and confidence when talking to international clients and colleagues, then this video is for you. Business English speaking tips, one way to improve your speaking skills. And it's a great one. This is often called the elevator pitch. If you're meeting someone for the very first time, you only have a short amount of time to tell them about yourself. How do you do that? How do you do that efficiently and impressively? Why do we call it an elevator pitch? Well, I'm sure you know what an elevator is, but what is a pitch? Literally, a pitch is in baseball, where the pitcher pitches the ball. He throws the ball, to the catcher. Hopefully the batter doesn't hit the ball. That's what the pitcher is trying to do. He's pitching the ball, throwing the ball. Now, we can also talk about a sales pitch, because the salesman, saleswoman is throwing out a pitch, kind of like a sales pitch, trying to sell something to the customer. And hopefully the customer does bite. They do choose to buy something. It's a pitch. And so an elevator pitch, you're kind of selling yourself. I mean, it's not necessarily a sales pitch, but you're selling yourself in an elevator. So imagine you walk into a building, you head to the elevator, you get in, you hit that button for floor 4, floor 14, wherever you're going. And while you're doing that, you meet someone new. And then, that you start talking, they say, hey, what do you do? Where do you work? Now, you don't have much time. You're only going to the 4th floor or whatever floor you're going to. And then those doors are going to open and you're going to get off or he's going to get off. You're not going to see him again, maybe. You want to see them again. Maybe you can do business in the future. So you want to impress that person. Now, how do you explain what you do if you only have 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds, maybe 2 minutes? But unless you're going in a skyscraper, you're probably not going to have more than a couple of minutes to quickly explain who you are, what you do, and maybe what company you're in, what line of business you're in. Now, depending on who this person is, your goals may be different. Maybe you are a salesperson. You do want to kind of make a sales pitch. But maybe this is someone that maybe in the future you want to work for. Oh, wow, you work at that company? I'd love to get a job there someday. Maybe you're thinking that. Maybe you're saying it out loud. Depends on the situation. But you're networking. You're kind of meeting new people, and you want to give a good impression of yourself. So you want to give a good elevator pitch. Now, when you think about that, you do this all the time. You meet someone new or even someone that you know already, and they say, oh, what are you doing now? It's kind of a modified elevator pitch. You're succinctly, quickly explaining what do you do. Now, they already know who you are, and maybe they know your background, but you're kind of updating them on that part. If you're meeting someone brand new, then you have to choose, should I tell my background? Should I tell the previous positions I've had, the previous employers, or just stick with this one? Maybe you have different things going on. You have different positions, different responsibilities, in the company. Maybe you have more than one job. Which one do you tell them about? So those are all things that you have to think about and strategically think about when you come up with your elevator pitch. Now, the first thing I would recommend you do is come up with an outline. Think about the major things that you do or the major things about you. When you meet someone for the very first time, what do you usually say? What do you usually talk about? And what is important to talk about? What do they want to know about you? It kind of depends on you, your specific position, and maybe the experience that you have. If you are only been out of university for a year or two, then maybe mentioning what university you went to, what you majored in, what your degree is in, maybe that's relevant. But if you've been out of university for 10, 20, 30 years, That's probably not going to be that relevant. It's much more important to talk about the recent stuff. What have you been working on? What have you been doing? That sort of thing. Now, when you think about that, well, what do you do? What are your responsibilities? What do you do at the position that you're in? What is your position title? The first thing you do when you're coming up with this list is maybe brainstorm. You're casting a wide net. Think about all the things that you're responsible for, all the things that you could talk about, that generally make you look good, of course. And then, get those down on paper. Now, start to refine that list. What's most important? And try to come up with a few different bullet points that are worth telling somebody about. Now, I would never recommend lying or deceiving anyone. Certainly you don't want to do that. I think it can really come back to bite you, in the end. But you do want to put your best foot forward. For example, maybe you have 5 different responsibilities in your current position. 2 are very impressive. 2 are as you would expect for this type of position. And 1 is very minor, or even you might even be embarrassed about that. You still have to do this. Well, maybe you just don't mention that last one. That 5th one, maybe it's not important that you mention. Now, I'm not saying you lie about it, or if you get asked about it, you're not going to deny it or something like that. But when you're choosing what you're going to talk about, that doesn't make the list. That drops away. So go through your list and think, what are the most important things, the most impressive things that you want to talk about. And then you want to kind of think of them as modular blocks, that you don't want to memorize the script. That's not fun to listen to. We've all listened to people that kind of go on, and they say the same thing again and again. You can tell they may be telling it to you for the first time, but they've said these same words, these same sentences, these same paragraphs, 100,000 times. It's usually very boring to listen to. So you don't want to memorize exactly what you're going to say. You just want to kind of come up with the things that you're going to talk about. You just come up with that outline. Now, once you have that outline set, or at least a work in progress, you want to start practicing how do you talk about those important things. You have the bullet points, how do you talk about them? Now, like I said, I wouldn't write out word for word. Although, if your English is still kind of weak, maybe you want to do that. I would try to get away from it myself. I highly encourage you not to do that. But I know some people would feel more comfortable at least starting that way. But instead of that, just think of the bullet points, the major points you want to bring up, and start talking about them. Practice with yourself. Practice in front of a mirror, in front of a webcam, whatever, in front of your phone. But just practice talking about those points. Now, in the very beginning, don't worry about time. Don't worry about anything else. Just take your time talking about these things. Get used to talking about yourself. A lot of people have problems with this. How do you explain what you do? Maybe it's a humility issue. They just don't want to talk about themselves. But other times, people will have a hard time explaining what do I do? Now, if you do something very technical, and you're talking about someone who's in that same field, is also very technical, then you can feel free to describe it at a very high level, very technical level. You're an IT professional talking to another IT professional. You're some kind of medical surgeon talking to another surgeon. You're going to explain what you do very differently than if you're telling your grandmother or your neighbor who's not a surgeon, who's not an IT professional. That's normal. So you want to practice kind of explaining it both ways. If you have a very technical field like that you would explain differently to somebody in that field, in that business. So keep that in mind as well. So practice through talking about these different things. And then once you're kind of comfortable with it, then start paying attention to time a little bit. Okay, how long does it take to go through my list? Like if you're thinking about that elevator, you've only got 30 seconds, 60 seconds, maybe a couple of minutes. And of course, maybe you want to be able to have some more to talk about, but you want to have an idea how long does it take to get through my spiel, my pitch. Now, maybe when you do that, keep in mind some things, even though you've tried to get rid of the weak points already, some of the things that you say may be less important than other things. So you generally want to lead with your strongest cards. If this is the best thing that you can say about yourself, about your job, then you want to lead with that. Now, keep those other things as kind of backups. If he doesn't get off on the 4th floor and you're still riding the elevator, You want to be able to say, okay, what's my next thing that I can talk about? The elevator opens and closes. Again, he doesn't get off, she doesn't get off. You have a little bit more time. Ideally, you have more things to talk about. Now, also keep in mind, if you come up with, let's say, 5 things to talk about, and maybe you're only normally going to talk about A, B, and C. Maybe if there's extra time, you're going to bring up D. Maybe if there's even more time, you bring up E. If they're really that interested in what you're saying, then that's fine. If the person is really interested in B, maybe that's their industry, that's their field, or that's what they're looking for, or something like that. Well, then drop A, or save A for later. Start with B. Just because you normally start with A doesn't mean that you shouldn't start with B or C or even D sometimes if it fits the audience. This person is going to be more interested in D. I'm going to lead with my normal D. My normal fourth point is going to be my first point talking to this person. That's perfectly fine. Another thing to think about is, what do you say about your company? Now, if you work in a very large company that everybody knows, or you recognize this person is familiar with your company, then you don't have to say much about it. I mean, if you say, oh, I work at Amazon, or I work at Google Alphabet, I work at Apple, you don't have to explain what you do. Very few people do you have to explain what Apple does. But if you work in a regular sized company, you may meet someone that has no idea what your company does. Or they might have an idea, but that idea might be wrong. I mean, they may have heard about your company. They might even think they know about your company, but maybe there's lots of things about your company they don't know. This is your opportunity to kind of, put the best foot forward and explain something about the company that they didn't know. Now, how much time do you spend on the company? How much time do you spend on you? Keep in mind what your goals are, meeting this person, talking to this person. But you want to make your company look good and impressive because that makes you look good and impressive. So, it kind of goes hand in hand. So keep those things in mind when you have your outline, when you're practicing, and start practicing different situations. Practice out loud. If you're feeling comfortable with it, maybe record it, on a webcam on your phone, and then listen back or watch it back, and then see what do you like, what don't you like about it. And when you meet new people, try it out. The next time you're going to a networking event, a luncheon, a dinner, a conference, some kind of training, when you're meeting new people, try out the elevator pitch. Now, as you do it, you might notice, wow, I didn't like that about it. Maybe I liked A but not B. I really need to work on B. Or maybe I want to get rid of B. Nobody cares about B. I'll just go right to C. Or, the transition from B to C just isn't that smooth. How do I go from B to C? Or maybe the transition from B to C is not that smooth. You want to smooth that out. Come up with a way of going from one topic to the next. But those are all things that you want to practice. So your elevator pitch is never set in stone. It's never fixed. It's always a work in progress, kind of like a resume or a CV. It may be fixed enough that you send it out, or you try the elevator pitch, but it's always being refined. You're always working on it. I find it very helpful if you do go to a networking event, a luncheon, dinner, some kind of conference, maybe when you get back to the office or you get back to the hotel room, think about how your elevator pitch worked. If you liked things about it, maybe jot that down. Or if you didn't like things about it, jot that down while it's fresh in your memory. While you were just there, you were just talking to these different people, put those impressions down. Or maybe you heard somebody else's elevator pitch and wow, I really liked how he explained this and then he explained that. Or, she really weaved this all together so it made sense to me. And maybe pull out some pointers from what they said. And you might not have time to work on it at that point. Maybe you got other things going on. But later when you do have time, you'll be able to look at those notes and refresh your memory, and then, oh yeah, I did have trouble with this. How else could I say it? And then there's something to work on. Another thing I wanted to point out is your lexicon, your business, your field, your expertise, your sphere, whatever it is. Oftentimes, you have your own words that go with it. Do you know those words in English? Maybe you know them in your native language, but you're not quite sure how do they translate in English. So this is something you want to work on. You can't necessarily learn every word in English, but if this is a word that's in your field that you would normally use when you talk about yourself or your company or what you do, then those are words that you want to add to your lexicon, to your vocabulary. So as you're practicing your elevator pitch, pay attention to those words and make sure that you've translated them, that you learn the English versions, that sort of thing, and that you're comfortable using those words. You understand those words in English. Another factor might be pronunciation. If your pronunciation is not perfect, don't worry about that so much. I mean, I always encourage you to improve, try to get as good as you can at everything, including pronunciation. But if your pronunciation isn't perfect, don't let that hold you back. There's worse things than poor pronunciation. Now, having said that, think about the words that you're going to say. If there are some words that are very, very tricky for you to pronounce, and you always say them when you're talking about yourself, your job, what you do, that sort of thing, then maybe you want to find synonyms to use. Like, gee, I always have trouble with this sound or this word. Maybe try to look up a synonym, a similar word that you don't have a problem pronouncing, especially if it's a word that comes up again and again. Now, I do have a caveat to that. I do have an exception. Sometimes there might be words that are tricky for you, but guess what? Sometimes you do have to master them. You do have to figure them out as best you can and work through it. For example, the name of your company, the name of the university you went to, maybe the state that you're living in, something like that. You want to be able to say as correctly as you can, but also naturally and comfortably. You don't want to struggle, saying the name of your company or the state that you live in or the university you went to. You want to be at ease when talking about those things. So if it's a word like that always comes up, you do need to spend some time to master that word, master that pronunciation. All right, it's time to conquer that like button and make it ours. If you like this video, I'm sure you're going to like some of my other ones even more, so please check them out. If you have any questions about this or about speaking English in general, drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have questions about. Work hard today and enjoy tomorrow.